Hey guys, my name is Austin Gregory, and in this course, I'm going to teach you how to create a little RPG town using the Unity tile tools, as well as some NPCs and a cool little dialogue system. So let's get started by creating a new project. Click on New in the Unity Hub here, and I want to call it RPG Town. And I want to use the latest version available to me, which is 2017.2. And it's going to be in 2D, and I do not need analytics enabled. So create project. So in this first lesson, we're going to focus on setting up our tile maps and getting some tiles on the screen. So we have a little town for our character to run around in and some houses to place our NPCs in so we can go talk to them and have a nice chat. So I want to create a new folder, and I want to call this one Sprites. Now I'm just going to keep all of my raw sprites in this folder. And I also want to have a folder that's going to be called Tiles. And that's where we're going to keep our actual tile objects in. Now in Unity, if you're not familiar, they have a whole new tile map system with a whole new tile system. It came out in the last couple of versions at least. And we are going to be using those to lay out our world. So included with the project, you will have a sprite sheet from Kenny. We're just going to drag this into our project and add it into our sprites folder. Now with the sprite sheet selected, I want to make sure that we're on Sprite 2D and UI, and I want to go down to multiple, as we have multiple sprites within this one sheet, and I want to go to Sprite Editor and click Apply for those changes. And what I want to do is I want to slice this up into individual sprites. Now I know for mine, they are set at 64 by 64 each. So if I go to automatic, it'll do it. It'll make it too tight on the windows and stuff because they're smaller than the actual full-size tiles. So I want to do it by size. Now, if you know the number of columns and rows you have, you can do it that way. But I want to set it to pixel size 64 by 64 and just click slice. And it's going to slice this up into individual sprites for me and click apply. Also, to keep it one tile equals one unit, what I want to do is make sure that the pixel per unit is set to 64. That way we have 64 pixels in a single unit, so each tile will be one unit. Or in this case, each sprite will be one unit. Now if we look here, we have all these individual sprites, which is exactly what we want. Now these are just sprites, these are not tiles. We have to create a tile map that we can use from these sprites. Now what I want to do is I want to go up to Window, and I want to go down and find Tile Palette. Now this is the tool we're going to be using whenever we're actually working with our tiles. But what I have to do first of all is create a palette that our tiles are going to be in. It's going to be the actual palette that we're going to take the tiles from and place it in our tile map. So I want to create a new tile palette here, and I want to call this one just RPG Town. Now typically you may have individual palettes for buildings and decorations or roads, stuff like that, but we're going to have all of ours in one palette just because the whole sprite sheet from Kenny comes in one, and it makes it a bit easier for us to work with in that way. So I'm going to click create. I'm going to put it in the folder tiles, select folder. There we go. Now all I have to do is drag a tile, sprite, or sprite texture to this, and I could just take this entire sprite sheet, drag and drop. And again, for the folder, we're going to put it inside of tiles, except I want to create a new folder inside of this folder, and I want to call it individual. I like to have an individual folder for my individual tiles, and you have this folder for the actual tile palettes. So inside of this, you're going to just select folder, and now it's going to build out individual tiles from the individual sprites. Now, depending on the size of your tile sheet, this could take you a while, or your sprite sheet, this could take you a while. And there we go. Now we have individual tiles all set up in our tile palette that we can select, and you can see we can actually start painting them if we have a tile map in our scene. So now let's do that. Let's actually create a tile map in our scene. So inside of the untitled scene here, I want to create a 2D object, and it's going to be a tile map. Now what this is going to do, let me just snap this up here for now. What this is going to do is create a grid object. It's going to have a grid component on it, and this is going to show us our cell size and some settings we can change. We don't want to do any of that for now. And then inside that, we're going to have a tile map. Now, the first tile map we have is going to be whatever we set it as, but this can be maybe the background tile map. And then we can create another tile map if we go to 2D Object, Tile Map. And this can be the foreground tile map or the decoration tile map, whatever you would like. And you would just change the sorting layers so we can actually draw things on top of each other, which we'll get to here in just a second. So let's create this tile map as the background tile map. And we'll create this tile map as the decoration tile map. Now, decoration we may not even use, but you would have like, maybe you have walls and you could put cracks on the walls, that kind of thing. So you would draw the tile map, or you draw the crack tiles over your background tile map, and you'd be able to decorate in that way. Maybe we would also have another tile map here that's going to be a collision tile map. And the way this is going to work is we're going to have a background, a decoration. We may have an object layer as well, but the collision one's going to be all the objects that you can collide with. So we can keep them all in one layer, and we can actually do something really cool with having all the colliders on one layer. We can combine them all into one big collider, at least if they're close enough together, which will be pretty cool. We'll get to that here in a second as well. And I want to create a 2D object again for tile map, and I want to have one that's going to be for objects maybe. Like if you have an interactable box or something, that kind of thing. And you can have as many of these as you would like. Obviously, don't go too crazy with it, but just enough to make it easy to work with. And I would like to have one for roads or maybe paths or something like that, so we can draw them separately. And we're going to be doing something really cool with our roads. We're going to have a auto tiling tool set up so we can just drag our roads out and it will automatically place the correct tiles where they should be. So now that we have our tile maps set up, let's actually set up our sorting layers so we can have the background draw in the back of all the other tiles, have the decoration, make sure it's on top of background, make sure our collision, is just that kind of thing. So what I want to do is go to sorting layer and go to add sorting layer. Now we don't have any sorting layers other than the default, so I want to add a sorting layer. I'll have one for background. I'll have one for foreground maybe. I can have one for characters. Maybe have a collision one if we have foreground collision objects. And we'll add more as we need them, but for now that should be okay. And you just drag and drop to order how they will draw. So up here, background will draw on top of collision, foreground will draw on top of background and collision, and so on. So now if I were to go into my tile palette, let's just snap this off to the side here. I'm using the middle mouse button to move around in my tile palette and just clicking and dragging. So let's just create the background, and so it can all be grass. So I'll just select this middle grass tile here. And what I want to do is select this box tool that'll allow me to simply click and drag. And that'll just create that many tiles to fill in that area. There we go. Now we have a grass background. Very cool. Now notice the active tile map is what I drew those tiles on. You have to change the tile map you're drawing on to make sure you're putting the tile on the correct tile map. And for instance, if we want to draw roads now, we would go to roads, and I could just say, okay, here's a road. But then maybe I want to make it prettier. Add this little edge to it here, maybe. And then this little edge right here. It's a lot of work though, right? I could do it right here and just have it like that, and then erase these from there. But you have to do individual tiles. That'll take a while. So what I want to do is I want to use something called a rule tile, R-U-L-E. Now, this is a tile that we can assign rules to, and it will have to abide by the rules whenever we're placing tiles down. So I can say, if I have this tile in the middle here, and there's nothing around it, then it should just be this tile. But if I have this tile next to this tile, maybe this tile should be an end tile. And the same goes for this tile. Maybe that should be an end tile. And maybe this should be an end tile. If there's nothing above it or beside it, then if there is something beside this tile, maybe it should be a corner tile if there's nothing next to it. Now we'll get into how we do that. But first of all, what I have to do is import a tool from Unity. It's also included in the package, and it's also available on their GitHub, Unity's GitHub. It's Tilemap Tools, or 2D Extras. You can get from their GitHub. I'm just going to drag and drop this into my assets folder. And that gives me Tilemap tools. Now what I can do with this, if you'll go up to Assets, Create, you'll notice I have Rule Override Tile, Rule Tile, and Prefab Brush. We'll be using both of these tools for this tile map. So for the road, what I'm going to do, let's go into Tiles here. I want to right click, go to Create. I want to create a rule tile, and I want to call it Road. Now up here we have Default Sprite. Now this is going to be just the default sprite you see, as this is just a tile we can place in here. It's going to be what you see, but it's going to do more than just that. So I want to make sure I set it as something that's obviously a road, right? So I can just say, it can just be the dirt square. That's fine. And then we're going to add in individual tiles that this tile can turn into based on its surrounding tiles. So again, the tile in the middle, if it has a tile to the left, but not one to the left of that tile, then this tile could be the edge tile, and that kind of thing. So we have to make sure we set these rules up to follow that. So what I want to do first of all is I want to add this road tile to my tile palette. I can just place it right there. And now it's available in this tile palette. I can paint with it all I want. So if I just come in here and paint, I can do that right there. Maybe we want to have a road just like this that comes through here. There we go. But I want to add the edges and stuff, so I want to make sure that it's going to work. And as I'm editing the rules over here, you'll see it changing so we can see what's happening. And just so we can see exactly what's happening, let's add a little fun path there that we can see how it changes. Now you may not need to have all this fancy edges, you may be okay with just the squares, but I want to show you how to do this. So tiling rules, I want to add a new tile. And now we're not going to be changing any of this stuff directly. All we're going to be working with is changing the individual tiles and then the rules for those tiles. So how do we do this? Well, let's go ahead and add the left edge for this road here. It'll be this one right here. Notice they all changed to that because this is the only rule we have. So what I want to do is I want to say for this left tile, if there is nothing to the left, so double click to get to the X, nothing to the left of this tile, but there is something to the right, there is something below it, and there is something above it. If those rules match, then I want to use this tile. And notice this tile, the reason I want that is because for the way it's designed, it has to have something above it to not have a hard cutoff, has to have something below it to not have a hard cutoff, and has to have something to the right side of it to not have a hard cutoff. Now notice our rule so far just changes this one tile, and that doesn't make any sense. If I add another one down here, you'll see it changes that one. That's because we only have one tile with one rule. So what I want to do is add some more so we can see what's happening here. Add another rule here, another tile, and we'll add the right edge. Again, it's changing everything, but I want to just reverse this one. Nothing to the right, but something to the left, bottom, and top. There we go. Now we get the exact same results, but on the opposite side. Pretty cool. Now let's add just the blank square. We'll drag this to the top for now. And I want this to be the case if there is something to the left, right, bottom, and top. So if there's something all around it, then it should be this tile because it's going to be just a solid brown and everything around it's going to be its edge. Again, nothing changed because we don't have any other rules to follow. Let's add one more rule here. Now for this one, we'll add a corner maybe. Now this is where it gets pretty tricky. So if I were to add a corner, say top left corner. For the top left corner, we would have to have, because the grass is on the left and the top, we want to make sure there's nothing to the left, so X, nothing to the top, so X, but we want to connect to a road that's to the right and connect to a road that's to the bottom. Just like that. And this is all you have to do for these tiles to get at the auto tiling that you want. Notice that works exactly like it would like right there. Pretty cool. Now we do the same for all the corners. So top right, we're going to just reverse this, right? So nothing there, something there, something there. We want to connect to the road to the left and to the bottom, but nothing to the top or to the right. Bottom right, bottom left. And you can see how this is coming together. Now if I were to come in here and draw this tile, things will change. Pretty cool. That's what we want. We want it to be very easy to draw our roads. Because you're going to be drawing a lot of roads in a game like this, right? Now let's do, say, the bottom edge. This one right here. Now this is only going to happen if we don't have a tile to the bottom, but we have a tile to the left, to the right, and to the top. Because roads are connecting left, right, and top to this tile, but no roads to the bottom because we have grass. Pretty cool so far. And again to the top. There we go. Very cool. So you see what's happening here, but you can also see an issue. This solid brown square doesn't have a corner that matches the curve of this. Luckily, our sprite sheet does have that tile. We just have to add the rule for it. Now, this is a bit more of a complex rule because I want to make sure there's nothing here for this tile to change. If there's something here that needs to be a different tile. So if this is an empty tile, therefore it should just be grass, and there's a tile here, and here, and here, and here, then we want to change this tile to be the one with the curved corner. So how do we do that? Now again, we'll have to do this for every corner, obviously, because there's multiple corners like this. So we'll come in here and we'll find this little... You have the brown tile with the grass corner. We'll use this one, and we will say there is something to the left and to the bottom, but there's nothing in this corner. So double click that corner to make sure there's nothing in that corner. That corner should just be grass, but there's something here and here. Well, and even here would make sense too. And there. There's a road connecting in every direction except for this direction. And could even be that direction, but it doesn't matter. And what I want to do now is drag this up to the top and let go. So now this is going to be an enforced rule for the first rule. The order of the rules here matters. So this rule, there we go. Very cool. And we'll do the same for all these other tiles. All we have to do is reverse. So we put the X here, then the empty square will be here, and all the arrows will be the same. Very cool. Now, there's obviously a lot more you could do with this. You could go in and make sure you have rules for everything. If you just have a single tile here, it's a little weird, you know, but I'm not going to, it would take us forever to do all these rules. But you know how to do the rules now, so you can do that. And the reason I'm showing you this is because little chance you're going to be making a full-on tile RPG game and not have to know how these rules work, right? Because you don't want to have to be drawing individual tiles every time you're doing this. You want it to just work for you as you're drawing, just like that. It's very cool. So now let's make an actual road. There we go. And just drag this on through here. Just like that. And now what I want to do is I want to add a little house up here. So for that, we're going to we'll use the gray set here. And I want to go to my collision tile map. And I'm going to first just click and drag on this roof tile here and select the whole tile. And I'm just going to place this little guy right there. And then maybe off to the side of this, we'll have a little roof that hangs off like that. That makes sense. So for the bottom right, I'll select this tile. I'm going to place it there. Bottom left, the opposite tile. And then for the middle, we'll do the one without any sides on it. Just like that. And you could also do a rule tile setup for this, obviously, just to draw your houses out. Would be really cool to do that. But we don't have time for that. So what I will do is this left, right, middle. And now this is a little tricky because I want to put the tiles there, but it's going to override the roof tiles. So what I can do for that, what I can do for it, and you could do it however you would like, I'm just going to add this to maybe the background layer. And then just boom, boom. There we go. Back to the collision layer. Well, the house seems fine. So now what I want to do is I want to add in our windows and stuff. So I can go to the objects layer for that. And I can come over and find a window I like. This window looks good. And I can paint this on right there and right there. Now we're not seeing it because our background needs to be set to the background layer. Our collision needs to be set to collision. Our objects need to be set to... Objects can be on the... We'll say on the foreground layer. It's fine. And then roads can be on the background layer. And now we're having an issue with our collision layer. So where is it at here? It's on the very bottom. We want the collision to be on top of background. Maybe not foreground. We'll see how that goes. Looks a little weird to those tiles. Maybe we'll add the longer windows. And then above it, add little baby windows. There we go. And now I want to add a door. So what I want to do is actually draw the door. on the same tile map as our objects. But the door is going to have to be an interactable object. We're going to have to be able to walk into it. And it's going to take us to the inside of the house. Now, to do that, we have to use something called a prefab brush, which is going to allow us to simply draw prefabs in our tile map. A prefab can be any object with any pre-configured settings on it. And I want to have it with a script on it that's going to make sure it loads the inside scene for this house. So to do that, we're going to create a different type of brush. So I'm going to go back into my tiles. I'm going to go to create, and I want to create a prefab brush. And I want to call this door, or gateway maybe would make more sense to be more universal. But the door, I want to set the size for the number of prefabs it's going to paint to just be 1. Now, if you have multiple, then you can paint different types of doors or whatever. But I just want to have a single one that we're going to set as a prefab object. Now, to make this work, I'm just going to create this little prefab real quick. I'm going to create an empty object, and I want to call it door. Now, this is going to have a box collider 2D on it. Want to be able to collide with it. Now, it's going to be a trigger object. That would make sense. I mean, it doesn't have to be. Whatever you want to do. We'll just make it not a trigger. And I'll just create a prefab from this. We'll add more to it later on. But for now, I just want to get all my tiles set up the way they should be. Now, what I can do on my door is drag this object into the element 0 there. And now for this brush, all I have to do is set my brush to be door, and then I can paint this door object. So if I go into the collision layer, maybe I can paint it right there. And you can see my collider there on the door. Very cool. And it adds it as a child of that tile map. Now, it may make more sense for this to be actually on the objects. I'm not too sure. Whichever you'd like to do. Now let's go back onto our collision layer, and we can add some trees. Now, the way I'm going to do trees is in 2 parts. I'm going to have the bottom be what you can collide with, and the top be something you can walk under. Because you want to walk around the tree, you wouldn't be colliding with the top of the tree because the tree is supposed to be standing on the ground, not painted on the grass, right? So if I have the bottom of this, and I were to paint this on the, let's make sure we change our brush back to default brush. We'll paint this on the collision layer here. I can put a tree right here. And a tree right there. Maybe a tree back here. Just like that. Pretty cool. And then the tops are separate. But I want to make sure they're not on the collision layer. So I can just add these to... Let's add them to the objects layer. Just like that. And now what we can do is if we go to our collision layer, I want to add a Tilemap collider to this. So we can actually make this stuff have colliders on it that we can interact with, run into, and physically interact with. So if I were to go into component, I can go to Tilemap Collider 2D. Now notice it draws these colliders in our scene view for us, which is very cool. But these big squares here, they're all individual squares. They wouldn't have to be the way this is set up. It could be one big square here, right? And I can do that by adding a composite collider to this. Now if I check used by composite, we can see what happens here. And if I increase the edge radius by just a little bit here, we'll be able to see what's happening. You can see the outlines drawn around the trees, the outline drawn around the house, and then this little bit here because that's not a collision layer tile in there, so it's actually drawing that, which is fine. Now you could go in and edit these individually if you'd like to, but I'm not too worried about it. That seems to be okay. Now this may be stopping us from getting to the door right there, so what I would like to do is just turn this back down to 0.01 or something, just enough so we can collide with it and we can see it, but not too much to interfere with anything else. And if we have to, we can always offset this collider a bit so we can actually run into it. And we'll see if we have to do that or not. And back on our collision layer, if you wanted to, we could add some water. I can just drag and select all of this, and I can just place a big old pond out here, just like that. And automatically adds the collision around it for me because it's on the collision layer. And that's why we have the different layers, because we want to have some things collidable, some things not. And that's how this is going to work for us. Very cool. Now, we don't have a way to test this out or anything since we don't have a character to run around in our world with, but we'll do that very soon. And the last thing we need to do for our sprites is I want to create something called a sprite atlas. create Sprite Atlas, and we're going to add our sprite sheet to a Sprite Atlas, which is going to allow us to batch them all together in one. What it's going to do is create an actual atlas of our sprites, and then whenever something references these sprites, it'll be referencing a coordinate on this one big atlas instead of having to load in these individual sprites into memory. To load in the entire thing into memory, and then we'll just reference different coordinates of the atlas to get whatever sprite we want. Now, for us, we don't have to do anything special to make that happen. Unity will handle it for us whenever we reference the tiles. All we have to do is make sure we create the actual atlas. So I'll call it RPG Town Atlas, and then just drag the sprite sheet onto this label for the list there. If you click Pack Preview, you'll see what it's going to do for you. And there's some settings up here to change how it works, but in my case, the default works fine. And it packs everything in really tightly for us, gets rid of all the spaces that it can. So now, whenever we reference a tile, it's just loading this one big thing into memory, and then we're just referencing individual spots of this image. Very cool. Now let's make sure that we save our scene out. I'm just going to call it Overworld. Save that. Now we have an overworld scene, and in the next lesson we'll start working on our interior scene, and then we'll work on getting those hooked up so we can actually walk into our interior scenes and walk back out into our overworld. That's it for this lesson, guys. My name is Austin, and I will see you in the next one.